I want to build yet another wheelie desk like I've built 5 before. This one is for taking to my in-laws, and I've already printed out some of my modified plans for this, and here's some of the wood I've picked out to use for this. And this is actually a pallet wood project in some ways because some of this wood came from pallets. It's just been plain since then. I'm normally too lazy to set up a dado stack, but for the vertical adjustment, the legs have each 3 grooves in them for the parts to telescope against each other. And so I bothered to set up a dado stack because I need to cut 12 of these, and they all need to be very consistent and precise. Now I need these at exactly 30mm increments from each other, and the easiest way is just to measure to the blade with a set of calipers. But because I might have a slight bit of wobble on here, I'm just going to mark which tooth I measured to, so when I measure the next time, I'm going to measure to the same one. Well, these fit against each other very tight. That would be okay for a joint, but these are actually supposed to be able to slide against each other. So I'll have to make another cut and widen those up a tiny bit. So this time I'm setting the fence to be 0.3mm closer, which should widen the slots by that much. That's better. That was the first time I've used that dado stack in years. Next I trimmed all the legs to 90mm in width. Having cut the vertical pieces of the legs, I need to cut the horizontals, and I was able to get these two out of one piece of pallet wood, and the top horizontal parts are actually tapered, so I'm able to get 2 of those out of one piece like this. I just milled up the bottom horizontal part of the legs and the top part that attaches to the bottom of the desktop, and these go together like this, and with these sliding bits I'll be able to adjust the height, and these are slightly offset here so that I can bring the height way down and actually slide this past the leg. Now I need to make a sort of a T-joint here, and I'm going to use 2 mortise and tenon joints, and I've already made a test joint on the panther rotor like this. Normally I would have just joined these with one big mortise and tenon joint using a homemade template like this one, but I wanted to try out these templates here, and just by putting 2 side by side on this template holder I can get those very accurately. And they also have a little slot in the side which makes it easy to go from one to the other when cutting the mortises. When cutting big mortises in hardwood, it's best to use a spiral bit and just hog out most of the material by making a series of plunge cuts. I only have 4 mortises to cut, and the setup for each one is a little bit different, so I didn't bother setting up any stops. So all I do is just put this at the end of its travel and line it up with the mark that I made on a piece of wood. Next I need to mill the tenons that fit into the mortises, and those are going to be laid out roughly like this, and that leaves an awful lot of material here that I need to cut away with a router, so I'll cut away most of it with the table saw. So now that'll assemble to armchair desk height to standing desk height. I need some method of keeping these leg assemblies from tipping to the side, so I'm going to make a bracket like this, and that's going to attach to here, and that'll stabilize it against side to side. To join the corners of the bracket, I'm just making some bridle joints with my quickset tenon jig. Now I'm moving the stops in by the thickness of my blade, which happens to be 100th thou. I'm adding a rabbet to the corner of this piece to make it fit around the leg nicely. It wasn't quite worth setting up the machine to cut out that little corner. Now some holes in this bracket for some alignment pins. I'm only using my hand drill to transfer the location of the holes, and then I'll drill it out on drill press. A few tricks I use to get these holes consistent and precise. First, I marked them every 3 centimeters just with a pencil off the tape measure. Then I made a very fine scoring cut in here, which allowed me to get everything centered. And I used a relatively dull center punch to punch the centers of these holes. And there's always going to be tear out on the back when I drill through, so I drilled almost all the way through, and now I'll finish the hole from the other side. So I punched every 3rd hole for the end here, then offset it by 1.5 centimeters, and then punched every 3rd hole again, and that gives me 4.5 centimeters spacing for the holes here. I counterbored these holes so that I could then insert nuts in here, which are cheaper than threaded inserts. And the way this works is we have a hole here every 3 centimeters, and there's going to be 2 holes that are exposed, and if I move this by just 1.5 centimeters, we have again at least 2 holes that are exposed, which means by having a hole every 3 centimeters and a hole every 4.5 on here, I can get adjustment increments of 1.5 centimeters. This piece of wood was part of a headboard from the garbage, and I've already started stripping some of the varnish off of it, but it's got this kind of purplish tinge to it. So I tried it on the back, and I think I like that side better. It's too much work with the scraper alone. want to make some trim to go around it out of white ash, and I want to put that around like this. Now if this panel was actually truly solid wood, the expansion this way would eventually cause that to pop off. But if you look very carefully here, there's actually a layer of veneer running this way on the top and bottom, and that stabilizes it, which makes it safe to put this on here. Now to reinforce the corners, I'm going to make a sort of a box jointy thing like this here with my Kwikset tenon jig. To cut these joints, I'm using the template feature of my Kwikset tenon jig, which I haven't actually used in a project before. And this bolt here catches in the notches here, so I just lift that up to go to the next notch and cut that next slot. Now to move from one set of cuts to the matching set of cuts, I just need to offset this template by half the width of one of these fingers here. So just moving it like that, and I'm ready to cut the other ones. I glued together two pieces of the trim, and now I'm attaching those to the top. With the glue on the first two pieces dried, I can now glue on the other two. I am rounding the corners to the top and then adding a 1/4 inch round over all around. The really small holes I'm drilling through are just as a reference for where to put the alignment pins. I'm using this block of scrap wood both as an angle guide and as a depth stop. My insertion tool is just a screwdriver bit that I put in the drill backwards. So these little dowels are actually alignment pins, and when doing that sort of thing, always put the alignment pin in the edge of the piece of wood, because if you were to put it in here, it would always stick out and make it more difficult to pack this thing. Also, make the hole it fits into always a tiny bit larger so you don't get stuck. And these pins, the way they are right now, makes it much easier to hit the threaded inserts. Star knobs can be expensive to buy, but they're really not hard to make. Set to maximum height, this actually makes a pretty decent standing desk, but that's not actually its primary purpose. It's actually meant to be a very low desk that you pull up to a couch, and for that it needs wheels.